Morning. Good to see you all. Uh, yeah, we may be missing a few people today for various events. I think the No Kings demonstrations are taking place today in many, many cities in the United States. So we'll see if some of the more activist members are off to that. So let's begin with trying to set a motivation for this next period of time. Sort of like when you mentioned this before, if you think of different analogies, like it's like when you throw a projectile, that initial impetus you give it is kind of like the one of the kinds of motivation you can have that determines to somewhat its trajectory after that, right? The initial impetus you give it. And then there's also the motivation that takes place during the, let's say, the teaching, but sometimes your mind becomes distracted. So it's very important to try to set that initial um, motivation to be positive and virtuous. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chushe kipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa sho. I said chushe, that's what I would say, but you would say chunyen through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki rola penche sange drupa sho. Then requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, having taken refuge in generated bodhicitta. O holy and perfect pure lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdoms, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma. Please send down that rain. And there we go, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, good to see you. Hi, Paul. Joined us also. Um, yeah, so let's begin with a little seated meditation to try to intensify the motivation that we created right now by saying the prayers. It's not something different. In fact, if you can remember, with the remembering consciousness, uh, all of the factors that can engender that state of firm determination to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. If you can remember that just by saying those words, that's wonderful. And you should be able to do that eventually. But otherwise, we need to sometimes spend some time to do it manually, so to speak. So sit comfortably, place your attention on your respiration, then apply the mental factor, mindfulness to that, so that you're keeping it in mind to the exclusion of all other thoughts. And if you have some success in calming the mind, bring your attention, move your attention from the breathing, respiration, to your mental consciousness, not your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body consciousness, your sixth consciousness. To be able to observe it, you need to, at first, observe its contents, because the mind itself is very subtle. The contents are obvious. Different images in your mind, the comments that your mental narrator wants to make, memories, plans, observations about the present, feelings. Look beyond them to see the substratum of the mind, conventional substratum within which those mental events are taking place. The conventional clear light nature of your mind. That is devoid of any obstruction to the arisal of mental events, nor to their dissolution back into the consciousness. Which means, as we have tried to recall again and again in the past, we can develop any good quality that we now lack. It's just a matter of entering it into the mind, familiarizing with it until it becomes second nature. And we can not only subdue our faults, we can eventually eliminate them completely. We can abandon them. Through applying their temporal and ultimate antidotes. The fact that we can recognize this and feel some joy in that is due to this auspicious moment that we are experiencing right now. The Buddha called an auspicious moment that's also called the life of leisure and endowment, or freedom and richness. We're free from the 8 unfree states. And we have certain things that we are endowed with that we are not always endowed with, like, for instance, being in a country where we can practice the Dharma. When the Buddha, even when we were born as humans, the Buddha had not always descended in a recognizable time before that, nor had he turned the wheel of Dharma, nor were those teachings available, even when we were born as humans. With the support of the spiritual community, and, like, say, a center like Shantideva Center, and benefactors, our own resolve, our own confidence, or at least hope, that our practice will bring positive results in the future. we're in a position to achieve the two great goals that the Buddha spoke of that were commensurate with this opportunity. We could achieve liberation from samsara, nirvana, or even full enlightenment. This opportunity is not always present in our rebirths. Sometimes we're born as animals, or many, many times, maybe most of the time in the hell realms or the spirit realms, the Preta realm. Sometimes as gods of the desire realm, long life gods, long lived gods, when we don't have this freedom to practice because either we're suffering, experiencing continual suffering, horrendous suffering in the hells or as a hungry ghost and so forth, or we're experiencing so much pleasure as a desire realm god or a long-lived god, that it's difficult to turn the mind to the Dharma. The Buddha extolled his Mahayana to his intelligent disciples, saying, those with intelligence should not be satisfied with my lesser vehicle teachings alone. You should enter into the Mahayana, which is our first hint beyond the selfish, from a Mahayana point of view, the self-cherishing wish to achieve liberation for myself alone. Beyond that, to think, oh, all of other sentient beings, all living beings, whatever form they are in now, as friends, enemies, or strangers, or animals, hell beings, insects that bite me, all of them are in the same soup as ourself. We're struggling within the ocean of cyclic existence, barely keeping our head above water, most of the time going below. And all of these beings are exactly equal with us in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. They've all been depthlessly kind in former lives. And if you think in this lifetime of someone who's helped you very, very much in years past, you still have a memory of their kindness and a wish to, at least not harm them and to benefit them if possible. So having recognized living beings as having been our mothers in the past and as being kind, we also try to engender the thought of repaying their kindness. And generate the affectionate love for them. That is to say, to see them as dear, even our enemies, even our kings. And to go beyond that, having recognized in our own meditations on the person of beginning scope of the stages of the path, that all of cyclic existence is of the nature of suffering. There is nothing stable, no stable happiness within cyclic existence. Things are changing. Just when you think you've got everything arranged right, impermanence raises its little head and change takes place. Not at all always for the best. Same with all sentient beings, even though they might find some self-satisfaction at some point, like the politicians getting their way. That won't last. And they will eventually pass away. That satisfaction that they have now is not something that they can carry with them to the next life. What they can carry, what we can carry to our next life, are the imprints of our mental states, whether they be positive or negative. So even though the great goal of enlightenment is something that we should be aiming for, to think, I'm trying to use this life, even if I can't achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, I'm going to use this life to create the causes of developing renunciation, the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, and the right view of emptiness in future lifetimes, so that I can achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment being the state of omniscience, the perfection of one's own aim and the perfection of the aims of others, from our point of view, in being able to display according to their needs the two Buddha bodies, the emanation body, the Nirmanakaya, like Guru Shakyamuni, or the Sambhogakaya that displays itself in the pure realm of Akanista to teach the Arya Bodhisattvas until the end of samsara. And to achieve the state of omniscience as our own supreme goal, we need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, every day trying to create some virtuous karma, maybe making offerings whenever we have our meal, offering some portion of that to the Buddhas, making offering at our altar and so forth, trying during the day to control our minds so that we don't harm sentient beings, and that we use our wisdom to benefit them in some way. To achieve this goal, we need to achieve these two goals of the accumulation of merit and wisdom that are explained by Nagarjuna in his commentaries to the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Mainly the fundamental wisdom that was commented on by Bhavaviveka and Buddhapalita, especially Buddhapalita, who Chandrakirti followed. Chandrakirti writing his meaning commentary to that, the Majjhimakāvatara, both its root verses, the Karikas, and his own explanation of the Karikas, in between the Karikas, his Bhasham, his self-commentary, auto-commentary. I think I'm going to participate today to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material in order to achieve the two collections, to accumulate the two collections, so that I can eventually, quickly, become a fully enlightened Buddha that can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead sentient beings out of their present suffering, eventually, however long it takes, into the state of enlightenment itself. That's the reason I'm going to be participating today, to accumulate these two collections, to become a Buddha, to benefit sentient beings. Okay. Yeah. Some of your placeholders look so realistic. Venerable Shanka's placeholder. Sometimes is that Shanka's there? So how are we doing? Everyone okay? Any problems? Oh, good. Okay. Paul and you have to leave earlier today to get the plane to where this time?
Jennifer has a work event in Lisbon, in Portugal.
Okay, so you are gonna get a little sun. Okay, that's nice.
Hopefully. Although I think it's supposed to rain the whole week we're there.
Of course, it's samsara. Uh, any questions? How are we doing? Mintu is here also. Everyone okay? No dharma itches. You need some salve. How do you say it? SALVE. How do you say that? Salve. I guess you don't salve. You don't hear the L, right? One of those words. So I wanted to mention, to begin with, one verse from the Guru Puja Lama Chopa that I've mentioned before. There are two verses that begin the first couple of words are the same. Chunam Rangshin. So earlier in the puja, just when you invoke the merit field, and you say Chunam Rangshin Droong Kundelyang. That means even though all phenomena are free of coming and going, so this is in the invocation of the merit field. So even though they are free of coming and going by their nature, still come here in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued and so forth. But that same kind of wordage comes again in the seven limb puja further on in the puja that says Chunam Rangshin Sema Dangdelyang. Does anyone know the verses well enough to know what that is, what that means? Do you know, Mikhail? Do you do Guru Puja? No. Don, you do Guru Puja sometime, but you don't do it in Tibetan, right?
That's correct, yes.
Paul, do you know? Chunam Rangshin Sema Dangdelyang. So Sema means signs. Dangdelwa means separated from. All phenomena are separated from the signs of inherent existence. Rangshin. Chunam Rangshin Sema Dangdelyang. Milam Jishin Kepak Tamchegi. So that means like dreams, dreamlike, and then Kepak means the Susokewo means the ordinary beings and the Arya beings. They're even though they're what do I say, Dega. So Dewa means their bliss and their joy, which well, I say you have to read the sentence in Tibetan. You almost have to read it from the end. Grant me blessings to be able to feel joy, or say Let me say the verse. Chunam rangshin sema dang dang yang milam jishin kepak tamchigi dega chiryang charwait nam karala dakchak sampa yang riango. So we rejoice from the depths of our hearts in the virtuous actions, the pristine actions that gave rise to the pleasure and happiness of ordinary beings and Arya beings, even though they are separated from, any signs of inherent existence. So what that means is that this is what we've been talking about again and again in various ways, that these two levels of truth, the conventional truth, conventionalities, or what we're experiencing now, which are said to be truths for a concealed mind, or as Jeffrey Hopkins coined, truth for a jerk. They do function, they appear, and they do have some kind of efficacy, even though they're free of any kind of inherent existence. So we rejoice in the virtues of ordinary beings and Arya beings that give rise to their happiness and bliss and so forth, because they do function conventionally, even though they're free of inherent existence. So if you ever have a chance to do the Guru Puja, it's worth spending time going over the verses and the meanings, because much of what we are studying now, and we have been studying for the last couple of years, are exemplified in all of those verses. And it becomes much richer if you have, if you can apply your present knowledge of the meaning of emptiness and conventional truth to those verses. Okay, I just wanted to say that. So we are at a point now where we're at an outline called Refuting the Intrinsic Existence of Potentiality in Past Cognition. This is on page 320 in Thupten Jinpa's printed translation, and on page 180 in the FPMT translation by Venerable Joan. Yeah. So this is where we said, we read this last time and said we would start here again and go over it in a little more detail. So it says, refuting the intrinsic existence of potentiality and past cognition. So what's the connection? We talked about the refuting the existence of potentiality, potential or imprint in the mind that the Chittamatrin wants to assert in present cognition and in future cognition. Now we're refuting it in terms of past cognition. So Jinpa's translation says, now to explain how such potentiality does not exist in past cognition as well, it reads, so again, this is the author's way of inserting the karakas. In Lama Tsongkhapa's text, it doesn't say it reads, it doesn't have in the actual original commentary about Lama Tsongkhapa, he doesn't put the karakas, he expects you to know them, but the authors are skillful to inject it here. So this is the next verse, what is it, 659. If consciousness arises from the maturing of potentiality already past, it will have then emerged from a potential extraneous to itself. Yeah, I'm not sure. Extraneous to itself. It just, in Tibetan, it just says from other than itself. Venerable Joan translated, if it comes from the ripening of a potential of the ceased, there will arise other from the potential that is other. That's Jimpa's just changing the word other to say extraneous to itself. And since the moments of this continuum would be alien to one another, they would be mutually different is what it says literally in the Tibetan. Anything and everything could emerge from anything. Okay. So Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary begins in Jimba's translation, if it is from the maturing of a potentiality already past. So what when to say if what is it here? What is maturing?
Consciousness.
Say?
Consciousness.
Yeah, consciousness. If we're talking about the consciousness, the appearance of a consciousness, if that is due to the maturing of a potentiality of the past, such as a specific potentiality imprinted on the alaya vijnana, the foundation consciousness, imprinted on it by cognition as it was ceasing. So remember, this is a common theme. Things are imprinted at the moment something is ceasing. Like, say, when you create a karmic action, as that karmic action is ceasing and it no longer has its own continuity, it leaves an imprint on the consciousness. So there's something similar here in the Chittamatra. If it is from the maturing of potentiality already past, such as a specific potentiality imprinted on foundation consciousness by cognition as it was ceasing, a potentiality for the production of a commensurate effect, that future consciousness arises, then an intrinsically distinct effect will have emerged from a potential that is intrinsically extraneous, that is an intrinsically extraneous cause. Why is this so, you might ask? Since the moments of the continuum emerge in a sequence, the preceding and subsequent members of a continuum would, for you, be alien to each other by virtue of their own intrinsic natures. Oh, yeah. Is that intuitively obvious? Is that obviously clear? Oh, yeah, a little bit. The wording makes it a little bit hard. So let's take a look at Venerable Jones' translation here on page 180. Now, in order to indicate that, quote, potentials rise, the potentials also do not exist for the past, Chandrakirti explains, and she puts in that the first two lines of that verse, if it comes from the ripening of a potential of the ceased, there will arise other from the potential that is other. That's literally what the Tibetan says. Triptan Chimpa is saying things like alien and so forth. So two things that are other than each other would arise, one of them would arise from the other. So in her commentary to that, it says, a consciousness that has been produced and is ceasing deposits an instance of a potential, right? That's what we were just saying. When a consciousness is produced, upon its ceasing, it leaves a potential. Generally, when you talk about a continuum, when one moment ceases, it gives rise to the next moment of the continuum. But if the continuum is not, when we talk about just a general continuum, if the continuum is going to cease at that point, is going to end at that point, it leaves the ceasing of that last moment leaves an imprint. Like when we talked about shikpa. How did we translate shikpa? Do you remember, Mikhail?
Disintegratedness.
Disintegratedness, right? We say that even though an action, a karma, has ceased, it has some kind of efficacy. It's disintegratedness that doesn't necessarily have to have to be imprinted on the consciousness, although eventually you can say that it is. So a consciousness that has been produced and is ceasing deposits an instance of a potential, which is a latency, for a concordant result on the mind basis of all. What does that mean for concordant result?
A result similar to the cause?
Yeah, you could say that is going to be similar to it, that is in accordance with, let's say, what does she say? Commensurate with? Concordant result. Concordant result.
And Jinpa says commensurate.
Right. So that means that what's in its eventual result is going to be, right? So, for instance, when you create negative karma, for instance, its commensurate result would be suffering, some kind of suffering. If you create virtuous karma, its commensurate or concordant result would be something pleasurable and so forth. If a consciousness that will arise from the ripening of a potential of a ceased consciousness arises, there will arise other, say, an other, a resultant consciousness from a potential that is inherently existent other. You might say, what's wrong with that? That sounds okay. And the text says, I think, Chichir Shena. So why is that? For you, that means that for you Chitamatrans, those continuity possessors exist as mutually different. So she's quoting now the third line of that stanza. She's divided it up differently than Jimpa. It is because those moments that are continuity possessors arise sequentially, but for you, that is, according to you Chitamatrans, former and later moments exist as mutually different by way of their own entity. So does he have that future consciousness arises in intrinsic different emerge from potential? So he doesn't have this word, this phrase, continuity possessor. What is a continuity possessor? So you have the continuity and the continuity possessor. Rangshingi drupa shengi nupale debo namshe shenjungwa gyuro. Where is this? Napa Sheba? Yeah. I don't see immediately where she has the word continuity possessor.
I think that's coming from the third line of the root verse, the Gyun Chen Nam, those that are endowed with or possess a continuity.
Oh,
Gyun
yes.
Chen Nam.
Gyun Chen Yan. Yeah, Gyun Chen Nam. Okay, thank you. So basically what we're saying here, let's go again over what Thupten Jim is saying. If it is from the maturing of a potentiality already past, such as that potential that was imprinted on the alaya by a consciousness as it was ceasing, a potentiality for the production of a commensurate effect, that future consciousness arises, then an intrinsically different, intrinsically distinct, intrinsically other effect will have emerged from a potential that is inherently other. Because according to the Chittamatra, the cause and the effect are inherently existent. And as they are other from one another, that is, the cause and the effect are different from one another, you would have this case that intrinsically different or inherently different objects can give, one intrinsically existent object can give rise to another intrinsically existent object, which the Prasangika would say would be logically impossible, because if something is inherently or intrinsically existent, it can't change, and it can't give rise to something other than itself because it is independent. Why is this so? The text said, we just read this a moment ago, since the moments of this continuum emerge in a sequence, one after the other, the preceding and subsequent members of the continuum would, for you Chittamatrans, be different from one another. They would be other than one another by virtue of their own inherent natures. They would be inherently other, inherently different. And when we talked about refuting, remember when we talked about refuting the production, inherent production, from Nagarjuna's root verse was not from what? Not from self, not from other, not from both, not from neither. Nothing is produced ever at any time, from these four extremes. So we went over the first two so far. We haven't yet gotten to production from what? Both self-production for both self and others, nor production from no cause. We haven't gotten to that yet. We're still on the production, refuting production from other. And during our general exposition of that, we talked about the fact that if two things were inherently existent, one could not give rise to the other, because to give rise to something means it would have to change. And if something were inherently existent, from the Prasangika point of view, they would not be able to change. They could not depend on causes and conditions. They couldn't depend on anything. Yeah, Mikhail.
Yeah, so back to these continuity processors, Gyunchen, is that referring to consciousness?
The consciousness of maturing.
Because the sentence before is saying the consciousness that will arise will be different from the consciousness before.
Yeah.
So, and we also often talk about consciousness as a continuum. So it has continuity.
Yeah. Let's see. So where in Thupten Jinpa's translation does he have the Gyunchen Nam?
He says since the moments of this continuum, he doesn't say possessor. He says the moments of this continuum.
Ah, okay. Gyunchen. So when we talk about if we talk about a continuum, I'm going to say the continuum of consciousness, it is comprised of various moments. Those moments are the possessor of the continuum. Okay, so that's why Jimpa is translated, and since the moments of this continuum would be alien from one another, and Venerable Joan translated, for For you, those continuity possessors exist as mutually different. So when it's talking about the moments of this continuum, that's the same as the Tibetan, literally the Tibetan, the continuity possessor or the continuum possessor. Okay? Mikhail, does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So then, let's go to the next paragraph. The root for the Sanskrit word for a continuum is tan. And it is stated, and where it is stated that it is stated that implies in the Sanskrit grammatical texts that were available at the time of Chandrakirti, and it is stated in one of the Sanskrit grammatical texts that continuum refers to extend. That is, when we're talking about gyun. Gyungi in Tibetan, it says Deyang Gyungi Ying. So Ying usually means, like say, for instance, when we say Chu Ying, Chuki Ying. What is Chuki Ying? Paul, do you know? What is Chuki Ying?
You mean Dharmadhatu or no?
Dhatu. Usually Ying means Dhatu, but Dhatu sometimes just, means sphere. But Dhatu in grammar also refers to the root. How do they translate it here?
Usually like verbal root or something
Verbal
like that.
root, right. So let's see here. Venerable Jones says, furthermore, with regard to the stem of the word continuity, or the root, the root of the word continuity, in the Sanskrit grammar text, it says, Tanu is extension, meaning that due to continuing, or due to a continuity, through issuing forth of conditions, it is a continuity or a continuum. When, like the continuity of a river, the relationship between causes and results operate continuously, the relationship between causes and results, between causes and results operates continuously, there is an uninterrupted abiding without any empty gaps due to the continuity of birth and death. A continuity is taken to be the appropriator of the three times of the composite, in that it is a possessor of parts, which are parts of some moments. It is not the mere non-interruption of former and later moments. Okay, so we read a little bit further there than we've read in Thupten Jinpa's text. So let's see again in Thupten Jinpa's text. It says, the root for the Sanskrit word for continuum is tan, and it is stated in grammar text, continuum refers to extension or extend. So that note 582, what does he say there? This is cited in Chandrakirti's commentary as well, and maybe a citation from a classical Sanskrit grammar text or lexicon, obviously from the time of Chandrakirti. And by applying an affix to this verbal root, the verbal root tan, there emerges the sense of transmitting hence continuum, and he puts in parentheses tantra. So I'm not sure if when we were talking a couple of weeks ago before before we missed last class due to my tooth being extracted, we were talking about this word continuum and tantra and so forth. I think John had said that he thought it meant, and I think you said also too, Paul, that you were thinking the word was Santana, right? And not Carlos Santana, as you had joked at the time. So Jimpa has just put in parentheses there tantra, but you could take this to mean Santana. So through the formation of a continuum, causes and effects operate in a related sequence like the flow of a stream, like the flow of a river, and the continuity of birth and death remains without any intervals of disruption. It is just such a momentary phenomenon composed of three temporal stages and persisting from past to future that is called a continuum or continuity. So when we talk about the mental continuum, right, we've talked about that many, many times, existing from beginningless time to the present, existing in the future through our achievement of enlightenment. We will have a mental continuum. And from a tantric point of view, we will also have a physical continuum of the subtlemost wind that has always acted as the support of that mental continuum. You have a physical continuum and you have a mental continuum. Making sense so far? Rachel is arrived with her hair down. Good to see you, Rachel. Making sense a little bit? Not totally lost? So it continues. Since the individual moments, I'm reading Thupten Jinpa again, since the individual moments are its constitutive parts, they are what constitute the continuum. They are the parts of the continuum. The continuum itself is a whole, which is the bearer of the parts, and not merely the absence of interruption between the preceding and subsequent moments. So some would think that a continuum just means that there's no absence between the one moment and the next moment, which is true, but it's not merely that. A continuum is the actual possessor of those parts, of those individual instances. We say that the continuum of this lifetime, even though your mind right now is different than it was when you were born or when you were 6 years old, they're all part of the same continuum, and that continuum is kind of like the possessor of those parts, the owner of those parts. Furthermore, since the continuum encompasses all its parts, the individual moments within the continuum are referred to as moments of the continuum, unsurprisingly. Similarly, because the constituents or parts of the continuum belong to the continuum, as we said, the continuum is a possessor of those parts, they belong to the continuum. The continuum is referred to as the appropriator of these members. Or, when we talk about the appropriated aggregates and so forth, the appropriator, the owner of these. A vase, for example, you talk about one particular thing that has a physical continuum, right? Here's not talking about the continuum so much. A vase, for example, is the appropriator, the owner of the lip So when you're talking about the vase, there's a little lip that comes over, right? When you have your hot water vase in your kitchen. Where am I? The appropriator of the lip, the neck, and so on of that vase. Okay, so far not so complicated, right? Making sense? KT, what do you think? More or less? Okay. Then Jimpa's translation continues, according to the opponent, that would be the Chittamatras, such preceding and subsequent moments in a continuum are distinct from each other, are different from each other. They are other than each other. The Tibetan just says that they are shendu tate. They are different as being others. They're not the same, right? The individual moments. The preceding and subsequent moments in a continuum are distinct from each other, and their distinctness, their differentness, exists by virtue of their intrinsic natures. They are inherently different. This means, from our point of view, from Prasangika point of view, that means that from a potential that is inherently different can emerge something that is inherently separate from it, inherently different from it. Now, if you, the opponent, if you, Chittamatra, were to think, since I do not accept this consequence, there is no fault here. I don't accept your consequence. We would say, then anything and everything other than itself could emerge from anything. So what does that mean? This means that from a potential that is intrinsically different, can emerge something that is intrinsically separate or different from it. From Prasangika point of view, that is impossible, right? And so if the Chittamatra were to say that he doesn't accept the consequence, so for them, things can be inherently different because any kind of phenomena that does exist conventionally has an inherent existence. So if they are different from one another, for Chittamatra, they have to be inherently different from one another, right? From the Chittamatra point of view. And so the Chittamatra would say, I don't accept your consequence because I think they can be inherently different and still give rise to one another. But for Prasangika, if things are inherently different, if they're inherently existent, they can't change. If they're inherently different from one another, they have no relationship at all, so they can't be part of a continuum. And so if the Chittamatra says that they don't accept the consequence, because we do accept, Chittamatra does accept inherently existent others, then we say, then anything and everything other than itself could emerge from anything. What does that mean? Doris?
I'm getting confused with a negative put in that sentence. You're saying since they don't accept the consequence, but the sentence says they do.
Now, if you, the opponent, were to think, since I do accept this consequence, there is no fault here. Oh, okay. So, sorry. This means from potential A that is intrinsic. Okay, let me take a look again. Sorry. So let me read what Venerable Joan has translated for this. Former and later moments are asserted by the opponents to be two things, mutually other and different as other, and two, they are asserted as an established by way of their own character otherness, or an inherently existent otherness. They're accepted to be other, and they're to be inherently other. If that were the case, that which is other would arise from a potential that is inherently existent other. And the Chittamatra, she writes it this way, the Chittamatrans say, there is no fault in asserting that.
Yeah, because Lama Tsongkhapa just said that a consciousness intrinsically different from the potentiality can emerge. And Chittamatra say, yeah, fine.
Yeah, yeah. So let me just see from Doris's. So since I do accept the consequence, there is no fault here. Is that what it says in the Tibetan? This is a little bit different than what Venerable Joan has there, right?
But it's the Bechir. Yeah, we accept, and it's the same in the FPMT translation.
Galte deni dobechir, there's no fault because of accepting that. If they say that, if we accept that. This means from a potentiality that is intrinsically distinct can emerge something that is intrinsically separate from it. And you're right. So as Doris was asking, they would say, yeah, we accept that. There's no fault. We do accept that something intrinsically different can give rise to something intrinsically different than itself. And then we would say, as a result of that, if that were the case, then anything and everything other than itself could emerge from anything. That's what the Prasangika says. And that's what we had talked about before when we talked about production from other. How do you get through that argument? Does anyone know? Rachel, were you here during that time? When we say anything could arise from anything?
I don't remember, but it makes sense that if you can have a distinctly different cause, then anything can, and then it comes up with a distinctly different result, then there's no cause and effect. Anything can arise from anything.
Yeah, is that what you were going to say, Luis?
Yeah, no dependent relationship, no cause and effect.
Right, but the Chittamatra, they don't see that as a contradicting dependent arising.
Which is weird.
Yeah, so in Venerable Jones' translation, it says, there's no fault in asserting that. Prasangika says, because of that, everything would arise from all, and that's the fourth line of verse 659 that Jimpa quoted earlier. Because of that, everything would arise from all things that are other than itself. Okay. So let's continue. So now the next two verses are quoted. It says, you may say that though these moments are distinct, they have no separate continua. So therefore, the objection does not apply. But this thesis is unproven. For such a single shared continuum is untenable. That's how Jimpa's translated that. Again, why is this not coming there? Okay. Let's see what, that's 680. Venerable Jones' translation here. Ooh. Not 680, 660. So she translates just after the Prasangika says, because of that, everything would arise from all the things that are other than itself. Just after that, the Chittamatrans say, so that's what this verse is now giving the Chittamatra position. Regarding them, the continuity possessors are different because the continuity regarding them is not different. There is no fault. And that goes to the middle of the third line there in Jimpa's translation. So therefore, the objection does not apply. So what does that mean? You may say that though these moments are distinct, they have no separate continua. So therefore, the objection does not apply. What's going on there?
Venerable George, is this where they're saying that the continuum is an entity separate from the distinct moments then? Is that what that's meaning?
Yeah.
Yeah. The continuity and its constituent parts are different from one another, right, Mikhail? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's the same debate explanation regarding intrinsically existing selves being of the same continuum. I'm losing my. When you have if things are inherently existent, then they are inherently other, and they cannot be of the same continuum. That's impossible.
Right, right. So let's take a look at what is actually saying there. I've got it on different pages here, so I have to scroll back and forth. You may say, so this is talking to the Chittamatrans, right? Or no? When it says, you may say, well, let's look at the commentary to that. After those two verses, Jimpa's translation doesn't always accord with the actual words of the Tibetan. He sort of glosses it sometimes. So he says, you may say that though these individual moments in a continuum in which the successive moments function in a temporal sequence are distinct from each other by virtue of their intrinsic nature. Okay, so that seems to be the Prasangika saying that, right? Whereas in Joan's translation, she has just before that verse, the Chittamatrans say, regarding them, the continuity possessors are different because the continuity regarding them is not different. There is no fault. There's a little bit.
Yeah, because they accept that things exist inherently, but are still of the same continuum.
Right.
Like the Chittamatra.
Right. The Chittamatra accepts that. Yeah, that for them there's no problem, so the objection does not apply. So let's read before we read the next Karika 661. Let's read after saying hello to John, who's popped in. You may say that though these individual moments in a continuum, so this seems to be Prasangika talking to Chittamatra, whereas in Joan's translation, it's Chittamatra just stating this. You may say that though these individual moments in a continuum in which the successive moments function in a temporal sequence are distinct from each other by virtue of their intrinsic nature, that they are inherently different, these sequential moments have no separate continua. They all share a single continuum. So therefore, the objection that everything can originate from everything else does not apply. What does that mean? Are distinct from each other by virtue of their intrinsic nature. These sequential moments have no separate continua. They all share a single continuum. Does that make sense? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, it's hard to see how that they can be in the same continuum but have intrinsic natures moment by moment. So I think Venerable Joan is right. This does seem to be the Chittamatras speaking to the persona. I'm assuming this is just Chandrakirti unpacking what the Chittamatrans say in the first 3 lines of
Right,
verse 60.
it would seem like that way. So Venerable Joan's translation says, in addition, let me make sure, yeah. So this is just as commentary to the first 3 lines of that 2.5 lines up to the point, but this thesis is unproven in Thupten Jinpa's translation. She translates, in addition, former and later moments operate sequentially. Regarding them, she has in italics, substantial moments having continuity, being established by way of their own entity, mutually different, in fact exist as otherness. So that being the case, because the continuum regarding those former and later moments is not different, that is, it is not only one, there is no fault of the consequence of everything being produced from everything. Former and later moments are a single continuum. This is the actual response that abandons the absurd consequences regarding production from others. So this is all Chittamatra talking. So that's a little bit different, I think, than I'm reading what Thupten Jinpa's translation is.
But Jinpa starts the paragraph by saying, you may say that. So it's still in the mouth of the Chittamatrins, I think.
Yeah, right. Let's see. So in the Tibetan, that whole paragraph begins with gelte and ends with shena. So that's the classical explanation. Gelte means if, and then at the end you say. So Jinpa has translated that as you may say. Literally, you would say, if you say. So this is the Chittamatra point of view. So if you say that though these individual moments in a continuum in which the successive moments function in a temporal sequence are distinct from each other by virtue of their intrinsic nature. So this is supposedly the Chittamatra point of view. These sequential moments have no separate continua. How is that reflected in Venerable Joan's translation? These sequential moments have no separate continua.
The continuum regarding these former and later moments is not different.
Say again?
The continuum regarding those former and later moments is not different.
Are you reading that from the text, or are you just interpreting?
No, from Venerable Jones.
Oh, yeah. Also, that being the case, because the continuum regarding these former and later moments is not different. That is, it is only one.
Yeah,
There is no fault to the consequence of everything being produced from everything. So there's just one continuum that's going to give rise to its effect in the future. Right? How are we doing?
Venerable George, am I to understand that what the Chittamantras are saying is that each separate moment not only is inherently existent, but it is embedded within a single continuum? Is that what their argument?
I think so. Yeah. They see
Yeah, also breakdown.
yeah. It's okay. So let me just finish that paragraph and then we'll take a break. So again, I'll read what Thupten Jinpa has translated. You may say that though these individual moments in a continuum in which the successive moments function in a temporal sequence are distinct from each other by virtue of their intrinsic nature, these sequential moments have no separate continua. Where did you see that, Mikhail, where did you see the Jones translation of that?
Yeah, also that being the case, because the continuum regarding those former and later moments is not different.
Okay, so what he says is separate.
Yeah.
And she says different. So there's not it's not a different because the continuum regarding those former and later moments is not different. Yeah, then continue, Mikhail.
Yeah, and former and later moments is translated sequential moments, and that's it.
Yeah, so that can cause a little bit confusion there. They all share a single continuum. So this is still the Chittamatra point of view. So therefore, the objection that everything can originate from everything else does not apply. This assertion that the successive moments share a single continuum is also the core of the opponent's rebuttal against Madhyamaka, rebuttal against maybe the Madhyamaka refutation of arising from other. And he quotes there in note 584 on how this assertion lies at the heart of the opponent's rebuttal to Madhyamaka critique of arising from others. See page 213 above. Okay, so I have found that place, 213, and I'm just going to read this quickly, and then we're going to take a break. So this is not found, you have to go back in the written text to page 213, and it says, the response aimed at avoiding these faults. The opponent, that which is capable of being produced, is called, therefore, the effect. And that which is capable of producing it, though other, is the cause. Sharing the same continuum, the effect arises from its producer, right? From its predecessor, from its producer. Hence, rice sprouts cannot come from something like barley seeds. That is verse 615. So we're now at verse 660. So this was like, 50 verses or 45 verses before. Here the opponent states the following. Cause and effect are other than one another by virtue of their intrinsic characters. This is Chittamatra point of view. But this does not mean that anything can arise from anything, as we're trying to, as President Gika would like to say, if you hold this assumption of inherently existent causes and effects. For one can see that cause and effect in their own way have a determinative correlation, which is Jimpa's translation of just the Tibetan word nyepa, certainty. Let's see, where were we here? Determinative correlation with one another. This is so because that very thing that is capable of being produced by another thing is called or deemed, therefore, the effect of the other thing. The presence of the word therefore is at variance with the commentary. This is just an aside Lama Tsongkhapa made at that point. So we're going to take a little break here. I'll let you marinate. Recording again. There we go. Okay. So, yeah. So I was reading to you before, because in Thupten Jinpa's note 584, just at this point in the commentary, it said, on how this assertion lies at the heart of the opponent's rebuttal of the Madhyamaka critique of arising from other, see page 213 above. So if you have the written edition, you can check page 213. Let me just see here. Yeah. So at that point, on page 213, it says, there's an outline, the response aimed at avoiding these faults. So this is talking about verse 615. So as I mentioned before, we're at 660 now, so that's like 45 verses earlier. When we were refuting production from other, okay, sort of directly. So it said, that which is capable of being produced is called the effect, and that which is capable of producing it, even though it's other, is the cause. Sharing the same continuum, the effect arises from its producer. Hence, rice sprouts cannot come from something like barley seeds. That was the same argument that we're talking about now, right, Mikhail? So if you take a look there, it continues. Here the opponent, that means the Chittamatra, states the following: cause and effect are other from one another by virtue of their intrinsic characters. They're inherently other. But this does not mean that anything can arise from anything, like you Prasangika geeks think. For one can see that cause and effect in their own ways have a determinative correlation. So that's what Jinpa is translating at that point as the Tibetan word nyepa, which just means that they have a certainty with one another. This is so because the very thing that is capable of being produced by another is called, or deemed, therefore, the effect of that other thing. And then the text continued. I'll just read a little bit more. At that point, on page 213, where the Jinpa is talking about, this is the heart of the debate that's being talked about here. And a specific cause that is capable of producing the effect, though it is intrinsically other, although it's inherently other, is the cause. This is Chittamatra point of view, and hence is determined to be the cause. Therefore, so they assert, it is only by means of a special type of otherness that cause and effect are positive, not on the mere otherness in general. So they're saying there has to be a kind of a definite kind of connection between these two others for them to be called cause and effect. Furthermore, rice sprouts come from rice seeds, furthermore, rice sprouts come from rice seeds sharing the same continuum. They cannot come from something like barley seeds. Which do not share the same continuum. In the same way that barley sprouts grow from barley seeds. What is that famous verse? Mares eat oats. What's it? How does it go? Do you know, Luis?
Mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy.
Right. Yeah, it's just reminding me of that somewhere. In the same way, barley sprouts grow from barley sprouts. even in cases where they share the same continuum, only those that are its producer can the effect arise. Okay, they're making a good argument. For example, subsequent instances do not produce preceding results. Only the ones that are just, adjacent to it beforehand. It is only the preceding instances within the same continuum that produce subsequent instances. Hence, the opponent might assert, not just anything can arise from anything. So I would just offer that. So if you take a look in your own book, you can find that explanation. You can go over it again and check how Venerable Joan translated it at that time if you have the interest to clarify that. Okay, so now we're going to go to the commentary to the next verse, which Jimpa had inserted above. So that verse 661 says, attributes of Maitreya and Upagupta, who are distinct, cannot belong to a single continuum. Things different from each other through intrinsic characteristics could not logically be part of a single continuum. Okay, who are Maitreya and Upagupta? How did they get messed up in this?
I think they are just random people, no?
Yeah,
Just like we would say Paul and John, I don't know.
Yeah. Peter and Paul or something like that. So Maitreya obviously was one of the disciples of the Buddha, but there is also the Maitreya who will come as the future Buddha and so forth. There's a big discussion that some of you know, maybe if you studied Abhisamaya Alamkara, big section at the beginning talking about the difference between the Bodhisattva Maitreya and the Buddha Maitreya and so forth and so on. So you know who Maitreya is, although it can be, as Mikhail is saying, just like saying Peter and Paul, but these are names that are common. Upagupta, who was Upagupta? Does anyone know? Is that someone in the Buddhist?
Wasn't he the monk who converted Ashoka?
Yeah.
Or he was at the time of Ashoka, I think.
Yeah. So he did not meet the Buddha. He came after the Buddha, and he was someone influential in converting Ashoka to Buddhism. Yeah. Mikhail, what do you think?
And isn't there also a quote from I think the King of Concentration Sutra, where Upagupta attained shamatha, but immediately after it was criticized or get angry and fall down to the lower realms, something like that. Wasn't it Upagupta?
That doesn't ring a bell, but it might be.
I'll check.
Yeah, if you
That
could.
was Udraka.
Oh, Udraka, sorry.
Udraka, yeah.
My bad.
Yeah. Upagupta. Okay, so attributes of Maitreya and Upagupta. So you have two different people. You have Paul and John from the Beatles, or Paul Hackett and John Campbell. Yeah. They are of a different continua. We know that. We can see that. They are distinct. They're different. They cannot belong to a single continuum, right? Things different from each other intrinsically or inherently could not logically be part of a single continuum.
How would that apply, though, if you had a bodhisattva emanating multiple emanations?
Mm-hmm.
Are they part of the same continuum, or are those different continuums?
Yeah, they would be part of the same continuum, but here we're talking about two different people just in the conventional sense, not talking about magical creations, like Paul and Ringo or something like that. They can't be part of the same continuum. So let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to this is. Jimpa's begins with the bracketed word reply. It may be that if a single shared continuum, so this is Prasangika speaking, right? It may be, could be, that if a single shared continuum could be established for two temporally sequential moments that exist as intrinsically separate entities, the fault charged might not hold. So again, this is talking about, I can't remember what tense this is talking about, what case this is talking about in Sanskrit, talking about something that might be the case. It might be, he says, it may be that if a single, you could consider that if a single shared continuum could be established for two sequential moments, temporally sequential moments that exist as intrinsically separate entities, the fault charge might not hold. Could they share a single continuum? Why not? Mika.
Because if they are intrinsically separate, then they have no relation at all.
Right. If they're inherently other, they can't have any kind of relationship at all. But since existence of such a shared single continuum has not been established, this, the Chittamachans would like to say that there is a shared continuum of these inherently existing moments. But since an existence of such a shared single continuum has not been established, this thesis is unproven. Or as, how did Venerable Joan translate it a little bit differently there? That since this single continuum is not established, that single continuum is to be proven. Yeah, this thesis is unproven. Then Jimpa's translation continues, how is this so? For such a single shared continuum, single shared continuum is untenable for preceding and subsequent moments of things that are different from each other through intrinsic characteristics. Oh, okay, so the for means because such a single shared continuum is untenable for preceding and subsequent moments of things that are different from each other inherently, right? That's nothing new. We're stating the same thing again and again. For example, when one speaks of the attributes of Maitreya and Upagupta, who are distinct persons, they are different persons, they cannot belong to a single shared continuum. So Paul and Ringo, well, do you have a question on it? I saw your thumb going up on the side of the screen there for some reason. Yeah. So Paul and Ringo don't form a single continuum. They're different, and their attributes they cannot form a single continuum because they are different from one another. But since the existence of such a shared continuum has not been established, this thesis is unproven. How is this so? For such a single shared continuum is untenable for preceding and subsequent moments of things that are different from each other through intrinsic characteristics. For example, when one speaks of the attributes of Maitreya and Upagupta, who are distinct persons, they cannot belong to a single shared continuum. So now we're talking about the attributes, the skin color, or the color of their eyes, or the length of their hair, how old they are, or something like that. One speaks about the attributes of Maitreya and Upagupta, who are distinct persons. They cannot belong to a single continuum. Similarly, Prasangika will argue, inherently different temporal sequential moments could not logically be part of a single shared continuum. So this is something we mentioned at the time back when that earlier verse, when we're talking about production from other, that's important. It would come up again and again when you're talking about two different things that are inherently existent. If you're talking about a continuum, every moment of the continuum acts as the cause of the next moment of the continuum, which is its effect. If they are inherently different from one another, from the Prasangika point of view, they couldn't belong. Well, they couldn't be cause and effect. They couldn't belong to the same continuum, and so forth. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. So Thupten Jinpa's translation continues. When understood thus, we can see that this essential point here is how the opponent's defense, and that defense is that a rice seed and its sprout share the same continuum, but not a rice seed and a barley sprout. So Chittamatra would say that a rice seed and a rice sprout share the same continuum, but a rice seed and a barley sprout do not share the same continuum, right? But not a rice seed and a barley sprout. So the absurd consequence that everything can originate from everything else will not ensue. That's what they would like to say. That fails to rebuff our objections precisely because the opponent asserts intrinsic separateness, differentness of things. Jimmy says, it is crystal clear that the objection is not against mere otherness. Prasangika says things can be other than one another conventionally. And if they're conventionally other, that means that they are merely other, right? They're merely imputed other. It is crystal clear that the objection is not against mere otherness, which the Prasangika does accept. So some who use the approach of knocking over the first domino, failing to understand that which is negated, failing to understand that which is being negated is being qualified in terms of the phrase intrinsically existent other, they leave aside Chandrakirti's own explanation how the opponent cannot rebuff our objection. They leave aside Chandrakirti's own explanation of how the opponent cannot refute our objection, object to our objection, and conjure their own fantasy explanation, something Chandrakirti hasn't stated at all. To do this is to sully Chandrakirti's perfect philosophical system. Okay, again, some complication here. So where are we here? So in the middle of that, near the end of that, there's note 585, right? So note 585 says, see note 395 above, okay, on the domino effect in this phrase. In brief, Tsongkhapa is saying that those who fail to appreciate this critical importance, who fail to appreciate the critical importance of the qualifier by virtue of intrinsic nature, they fail to realize the importance of the qualifying phrase by means of inherent existence. Read Chandrakirti's refutation of arising from others to rest on the rejection of mere otherness, i.e., in other words, if a rice sprout grows from rice seed because the two are distinct from one another, are other than one another, then everything could grow from everything else. This interpretation assumes that the force of Chandrakirti's argument comes from drawing parity between the rice seed and everything else insofar as their distinctness from the rice sprout is concerned, their otherness from the rice sprout is concerned. And when everything else is shown by one, is shown one by one to be not a producer of the sprout, the negation of the rice seed being the producer of the sprout would come about as a knock-off effect. So, yeah. So when he's talking about see note 395 above. So at that point, where was that? I have that here. Yeah, note 395 says this famous phrase that we talked about earlier, Dokpa chikpe pungpo, a pungpol. Dokpa chikpe pungpol. So Jimpa says at that point, he says, I agree. I, Thupten Jimpa, agree with Samten and Garfield, who were the authors of the translation of Lama Tsongkhapa's Ocean of Reasoning, right? I agree with Samten and Garfield when they remark that this Tibetan expression is meaningless in English if it is translated literally. Yeah, that's not so surprising. It has a particular kind of meaning. But the meaning is nicely captured by this idiom. The idiom, I guess, is a domino effect that Jimpa is talking about here. Let's see. Let's go back. When understood thus, we can see that the essential point here is how the opponent's defense, Chittamautra's defense, that a rice seed and a sprout share the same continuum, but not a rice seed and a barley sprout. They don't share the same continuum. So therefore, the Chittamautrians would argue the absurd consequence that everything can originate from everything else will not ensue. That argument fails to rebuff our objections precisely because the opponent asserts intrinsic separateness of things. It is crystal clear that the objection is not against mere otherness, which the Prasangika does accept. So some who use the approach of knocking over the first domino, failing to understand that what is being negated is being qualified in terms of the phrase intrinsically existing others, they leave aside Chandrakirti's own explanation how the opponent cannot rebuff our objection and conjure their own fantasy explanations, something Chandrakirti hasn't stated at all. Let's see. Do I have Venerable Jones' translation of that here? Yeah. So let's just see. So the Jones translation says, when understood thus, we can see that the essential point here is how the opponent's defense that rice seed and a sprout share the same continuum, but not a rice seed and a barley sprout. So the absurd consequence that everything can originate from everything else will not ensue. That argument fails to rebuff our objections precisely because the opponent asserts intrinsic separateness of things. Oh, I think she's just completely copying Thupten Jimpa's translation here in one of her notes.
Yeah, it was amended recently, yeah.
Yeah, it is crystal clear that the objection is not against mere otherness. So some who use the approach of knocking over the first domino, so this is her translation of Dokpa Chikpe Pungpo Sok Chepa, and that's in note, she says in note 585, failing to understand that what is being negated is being qualified in terms of the phrase intrinsically existing others, they leave aside Chandrakirti's own explanation of how the opponent cannot rebuff our objection, and they conjure up their own fantasy explanation, something Chandrakirti hasn't stated at all. To do so is to sully Chandrakirti's perfect philosophical system. I guess that's almost verbatim of what Jimpa wrote. So in her text, note 585, or no, is that Jimpa's note 585? Right, okay, we've read that already, okay.
It's note 83, but it just refers to Jimpa's text.
Right, okay. How are we doing? Confused? Doris, are you alive?
Alive and kicking.
Okay, good. Yeah, don't kick too much. Come on. Save those toes. Save those legs. Okay. So again, although this section, this section is a little bit complicated, and worthy of some research into what actually is being said here. I think it all boils down to this, the Prasangika position that the Chittamatra assertion of intrinsically existent or inherently existent otherness is not a problem. For Prasangika, we say that is a big problem, because if things were to inherently exist, they couldn't be related, they couldn't be part of the same continuum and so forth. Okay, so let's go on to the next section here. Refuting the opponent's restatement that consciousness without external reality exists. So this, in the Tibetan, it just says Nipala ni. So that means the second has two. So the second is an outline that came earlier. It says Laryang, which I think is where Jimpa gets his restatement, the verse restatement. Laryang chiro mepa nam sheyo sul jopa gakpa, refuting the proposition of the mode of existence of consciousness as without external objects again. Whereas, so Tubin Jimpa says restatement, Venerable Jones said, once again refuting the ways of stating the existence of consciousness without external objects. So this has two parts, two outlines. Stating the opponent's position and refuting that position. Remember, we mentioned in the outlines, it's always important to state the other position before you try to refute it. So first, stating the Chittamatran's position, the opponent's position. Having presented their standpoint thus far, with the view of still achieving their aim, the Chittamatra may once again assert their own standpoint. So in other words, we've refuted all these other things, but in some other context, or maybe the same person is so hard-headed, they're going to try to assert their own point of view again. So this verse 662, Chimpa has attributed to the Chittamatra. The arising of visual perception takes place from its own potentiality, wholly and at once. This potentiality, which is the basis of such consciousness, is what is termed the physical eye organ. Who can I ask? Louise, what is generally what do most of the tenets ascribe as the eye organ?
Is it the area in back of the eye where the data? I forgot the term. I forgot what the term is called, but it's not the data from outside. It's what your eye processes. It's somewhere in the back of the eye, I believe.
Right. Say in the retina, there are some, the Western science says there are what are rods and cones. Tibetan Buddhism says that there are subtler matter than that, that are the the actual eye organ, but they are physical, they are material, they are matter, and they are subtler than ordinary matter, but they are material. So here, this is the Chittamatras say that there is no such eye organ like the other idiots believe, from their point of view, that the arisal of visual perception takes place from its own potentiality. That is, the potential on alaya vijnana, when it arises, gives rise to eye consciousness and the object of that eye consciousness at once. This potentiality, this imprint on alaya vijnana, which is the basis of such consciousness, is what is termed the physical eye organ. So the commentary here, let's read that first paragraph there. The arising of visual perception or consciousness takes place on the basis of its own potentiality. This is Chittamatra talking, which exists in the form of an imprint placed on the foundation consciousness, the alaya vijnana, a potentiality that has been imprinted by another consciousness wholly and at once while it is ceasing. Remember, we were talking about when imprints are placed, they take place when something is ceasing, and the continuum of that there can't be any other continuum, so it leaves an imprint somewhere, like the shikpa or disintegratedness and so forth. It is from the maturing of such potentiality, from such an imprint on alaya, that an eye consciousness that resembles a previous visual cognition later arises. It is from the maturing of such a potentiality that resembles a previous visual cognition that later arises. And this uninterrupted continuum of potentiality, which is the basis of such eye consciousness, is what is termed by worldly people, because of their ignorance, as, quote, the physical eye organ. So the Chittamatra doesn't, anyway, some nuance here. They don't accept the same kind of physical eye organ that the lower tenets, the other tenets accept, or even the Prasangika accept. Chittamatra says that in actuality, no eye organ exists that is distinct from consciousness. One can extend this point to other physical sense organs as well. So in this regard, in the middle of that phrase, there's because of their ignorance, the physical eye organ, he has note 586. So note 586 says, in his examination of objects, so he's talking about Dignaga's, the famous logician Dignaga. So Dignaga and Dharmakirti, remember the famous logicians. In Dignaga's text, Examination of Objects, and he's citing verse 7, the last two lines, C and D, Dignaga writes, quote, the potentiality that empowers the co-emergence of blueness and its cognition, co-emergence. So what that means is that they both come about at the same time, the consciousness and the object of that, let's say the color blue. Dignaga writes, the potentiality that empowers the co-emergence of blueness and its cognition is the sense faculty as well. In his auto-commentary, Dignaga explains, so that was from Dignaga's text, Examination of Objects. So he wrote a commentary, an auto-commentary to that. Dignaga explained, as for organs, as for the faculties, they can be inferred as potentiality on the basis of their effects. They are not composed of material elements. So Jimpa in that notes, he says commentary on the explanation of objects. He gives the place that you can find that. So in this regard, those of you who studied low rig before, you may remember we used Lati Rinpoche's and Elizabeth Knapper's text, Mind in Tibetan Buddhism, which Paul has helped to re-edit in some way, right, Paul? You have a
yeah, not quite published yet, though.
but so
Although I would point out, Venerable George, Dignaga.
Oh yes, very. There he is. There's the guy, Dignaga in the background. Thank you. So in that text, in Lati Rinpoche's and Elizabeth Knapper's text, Mind in Tibetan Buddhism, page 141, if you have that text. Some of you do, I know. So it says, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, and Sautrantika Svatantrika Majamaka, he says Majamika, assert as the common empowering condition of I consciousness a physical sense power which is clear internal matter. Right? Does that make sense? We know that already. The Vaibhashikas is the lowest, the Sautrantikas, and skipping over the Chittamatra, and we go to the Svatantrika Majamaka, the Sautrantika version of them, they all assert the uncommon empowering condition of an I consciousness is a physical sense power, physical faculty, which is clear internal matter, just like Louise was talking about before. In the back of the retina, there's some clear matter there. The Chittamatrans, Lati Rinpoche wrote at that time, the Chittamatrans, on the other hand, posit a potency or a seed. They say that the uncommon empowering condition is form, but not matter. Remember, we were talking about these niceties before. So something can be form, but may not be matter. For instance, remember we talked about the visual form that's exclusive to the mind, to the mental consciousness, like having taken vows, what do they call it? What was the term for that? I forgot.
Phenomena spheres.
Yeah, phenomena, but the kind of form which is not apparent,
non-revelatory.
Non-revelatory form. It doesn't reveal itself to the sense organs. It's still called form, but it's not matter, right? So that's another example of that. The Chittamatrans, on the other hand, posit a potency or a seed. They say that the uncommon empowering condition is form, but not matter. This assertion is probably shared by the Yogacara Svatantrika Majamakas. The Prasangikas do not posit the individual subtle particles of the sense power, the faculty, or the collection of particles itself as the uncommon powering condition, but instead posit that which is merely imputed to these as the sense power. Okay. It's a background. Ron, are you getting a migraine? I can imagine getting a migraine at this point.
But, Venerable?
Yeah.
The Chittamatra refute matter in any way, always.
Let me read, in answer to that, let me read this one last place in that same book by Lati Rinpoche and Liz Napper on page 64. So that comes sort of in the introduction to the book. It says, the Sautrantikas and Chittamatrans also differ in their presentation of the uncommon empowering condition of sense and mental direct perception. Both agree that the uncommon empowering condition of, for example, an I consciousness is the I sense power. They both say there's the I sense power, the I faculty, and both call it form. zuk or rupa. They both say that it is form. However, for the Sautrantikas, this means that it is matter or bampo. I didn't know the Sanskrit for that. It's kanta. Is that a word that John or Paul are familiar with? Kanta? That's the word that Elizabeth Nepper put at that point for translating bempo. Bempo usually means matter. So that's a word I didn't know before. So for the Sautrantikas, this means that it is matter, whereas for the Chittamatrans, it is just a potency or power, a Shakti or Nupa. The latter, the Chittamatrans, say that it is a potency existing with the immediately preceding condition, a former moment of consciousness, and is a form, they say it is form, like a mental form and so forth, that produces a consciousness as having its own power, such as the eye consciousness having power with respect to colors and shapes. Usually we say the domain of eye consciousness is shape and color, right? That's what it actually perceives. When this point is debated, it seems that in the end, Chittamatrans do not assert any fully qualified forms. This is getting back to Mikhail's question, close to it. It seems that in the end, Chittamatrans do not assert any fully qualified forms, once both internal forms, such as the uncommon empowering condition and so forth, and the external ones, the observed object condition, such as the color blue or the blue flower, for the Chittamatrans, they are posited to be potencies. Thus, some earlier Tibetans said that in the Chittamatran system, that the Chittamatra system does not have any fully qualified forms. However, after further analysis, later scholars decided that this is not the case, that there is in Chittamatra no fully qualified, form. Hold on. After further analysis, later scholars decided that it is not the case that in Chittamatra there is no fully qualified form. And then one of these delicious double negatives. It is not the case that there is no form. So there is form, such as visible forms, sounds, odors, and so forth, but there is no matter, no physicality of those, since the definition of matter is that which is atomically established, composed of atoms, and in Chittamatra, there are no externally existent atoms. Okay, so if you want to research this point, besides the note 586 that Jimpa provided there from Dignaga's text, you can go back and look at Lati Rinpoche's text. So I'm just going to read this next paragraph. This is where we'll start in 2 weeks. Next week we have off because this is the last class of this of this section, and so we'll have a break next week, and then 2 weeks from now we'll start. So I'm just going to read this, which will start at that point. In this view, it is the Chittamatra view, the propensity that is the cause for the arising of eye consciousness is its causal condition, while in this view, the propensity that is the cause for the arising of an eye consciousness is its causal condition. So the imprint on the consciousness, on the alaya vijnana, is its causal condition, while the eye faculty is its dominant condition. Right? We have different kinds of conditions. Usually when we talk about conditions, what are the different conditions? We talk about causal condition. What else?
Immediately preceding.
Immediately preceding.
Empowering.
Yeah, so that's the dominant condition, empowering condition. So, and when we talk about causal conditions, we can have direct causes and indirect causes and so forth. So in this view, the propensity that is the cause for the arising of I consciousness is its causal condition. It's a cause that gives rise to the I consciousness, while the I faculty is its dominant condition. So the propensity on the alaya vijnana is the causal condition, and the what did he say here? The I faculty is the dominant condition. This statement made here of the I faculty being an immediate cause of visual cognition should be understood in relation not to just any I faculty, but to those where the propensities for the arising of visual cognition have matured. In connection with this, Maitreya's Madhyanta Vibhagna, Madhyanta, Mad means middle, Anta means extreme, middle and extremes. Vibhagna, he translates as differentiation. This is a famous text, one of the 5 texts of Maitreya that I've mentioned many times that Lama Yeshe taught us first. That was the first text that he taught us about emptiness, he said. So in that he says, perception of objects of sentience and of self, cognitions perceiving these do arise, yet no external objects exist. Excuse me. So the Madhyanta Vibhagna or Uttanamshe is basically Chittamatra, one of the 5 texts of Maitreya that's setting out the Chittamatra system generally. So this is the Chittamatra statement. Perceptions of objects of sentience, other sentient beings, and of self. Cognitions perceiving these do arise, yet no external objects exist. That's Chittamatra view, right? No external objects exist. The statement that perceptions of objects, such as form and so on, and sentience, here by sentience, he means the 5 sense faculties, do arise in reference to foundation consciousness. The master Stiramati, remember Stiramati was one of the disciples of Vasubandhu who became more sort of expert in what was the Stiramati's expertise in? Do you remember? Anyone?
Abhidharma.
Abhidharma. He was the one that supposedly was a pigeon when Asanga was reciting some texts, and then he became a disciple of Asanga's brother Vasubandhu and became more proficient, or sort of what Vasubandhu's star disciple of Abhidharma, right? So he's written that. So the master Stiramati, in commenting on this passage, so Stiramati also following Vasubandhu and Asanga, commented on the Chittamatra also. He wasn't just talking about the lower schools. So Stiramati, in commenting on this passage in Uttanamshe, also explains the physical sense organs as objects of foundation consciousness. So that note, what is that note? 585. I think that just tells where. Was it note 585 or 580 what?
88.
588. So that just refers to Stiramati's commentary on the 30 verses. So we'll go back to that. So according to the Chittamatra school, which accepts foundation consciousness, what appears as physical sense faculties to foundation consciousness is the eye organ and so on, yeah, let's say that's where we're going to begin after our break in 2 weeks, starting with that. Where did we start? Where did we get extended explanation? We finished in actually no I organ exists that is distinct from consciousness. One can extend this point to other physical sense organs as well. So in this view, yeah, so that's where we're going to try to continue next time. Okay, how are you doing? Doing good? Yeah, anyone have any questions? Nadine, are you still there? Have you headed off? Rachel, any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, no questions?
No questions.
Okay. You have what do we call it? This meeting at 5 o'clock. What's it called? The office hour.
Yes, Dharma office hour.
You can ask. You can get your questions answered then. So Anna, yeah, what do you think?
Venerable, would you mind if I ask you this again? On what page of Lati Rinpoche's book were you reading from?
Okay, I was reading from 2 sections. Let me see if I can find this here. So I read from, so in the book, there's a preamble, which is Elizabeth Knapper's sort of exposition, her explanation about the rest of the text, and then the actual text itself, which was more or less the translation of a Tibetan text on Lorig and commentary by Lati Rinpoche. So the first quotation I gave was from page 141. That's from the section where Lati Rinpoche is just commenting on this text, page 141. The second quotation I gave was from Liz Knapper's introduction when she's talking about the Sautrantika and Chittamatra difference. That's on page 64. So there are 2 different places. Page 141, where it starts Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, and Sautrantika, Svatantrika, Madhyamaka assert blah, blah, blah. And then page 64 from the statement, the Sautrantikas and Chittamatrans also differ in their presentation of the uncommon empowering condition of sense and mental direct perception.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can take a look, you can check back there. Okay. Yeah, so let's dedicate whatever energy that we've created, virtuous energy in terms of collection of merit, which we can say, and imputed collection of wisdom, because the collection of wisdom technically doesn't start, I think, until you have direct realization of emptiness, but our that which approaches that is also can be imputed as a collection of wisdom due to these virtues that we've created today, listening to the Dharma. May I quickly become a Guru Buddha, and as a result of that, lead all migrators without exception into that very same state. It's essentially, like our motivation at the beginning. May I become a Buddha in order to effortlessly and spontaneously, without error, lead sentient beings into that state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen in my mind stream, in the mind of others, as a result of these virtues, may it arise and grow. May the bodhicitta arise and grow. And may that which has arisen in my mind and in the mind of others not diminish, but increase more and more as a result of these virtues. And then the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's smiling face, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed away, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the triple gem, the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, great waves of mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of the new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And then finally, for all of our gurus, present, past, and future, we can say our primordial gurus, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please do not depart from me. So those that are humans now in the present, gurus, we say, please have a long and stable life. But those who are past and future, may we remain in continuity with them. So, yeah. So I wonder if, I think several people have left by now, but Doris, do you have the, could you put in the chat the article that you found talking about the enthronement of Geshe Zopa? Is that something you can find easily? So Geshe Zopa's reincarnation has been recognized. There was a ceremony at Deer Park, and one of a longtime Sangha for 7 years, she was a nun, Namdrol, who has been the co-director of Maitripa Institute in Oregon, in Portland, no less, for many years, disciple of Yangtze Rinpoche. She wrote a very nice article. Doris, are you there? Have you? Okay, maybe we can send a link to that.
I just put it, sorry, I just put it in. I wasn't sure which one you meant. So it's there.
Okay, thank you. Where is it? Is it there? I see ha ha ha, totally. I think Upagupta may not have appeared in my feed yet. Anyway, we can send a link to it.
Doris, I think you sent it to me by mistake because we had a little exchange.
You sent a private one. Okay, we'll send it in an email so not to take any more time. There it is. There's a link.
I spazzed.
I spaz all the time. So thank you. Yeah, so the little boy that is the reincarnation of Geshe Zopa, yeah, he already strikes me as very similar to Geshe-la and very concentrated and content and so forth. So it's a very nice article to read if you have a chance. So I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Next week we have off. Keep your minds in a good space. Use the adverse conditions now as conditions to transform them into the path by the Lojong. And yeah, see you soon.